All right, welcome back to the Comics Multiverse. As you know, here we like to, well, I in the work I do with the site comicswatch.com. Every week we run a post where we look at the different crowdfunding projects out there and try to help those creators get a little more, um, eyes on their projects and get them out there in the public. And um, this week we have a returning guest who we've talked to before about the catch, about Evie and the Helsings. Steve Bryant is here. I've met him through the Comic Geek Speak podcast community. But let me bring him in and let's find out what he's been up to and find out about his latest project. Hi, Steve. Sorry for cutting you off there.
Oh, no problem. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Oh, I can't complain.
I can, but nobody wants to hear it.
I'm making comics, so, By the way, I'm really making a concerted effort to look at my camera and not my screen, because I think I'll look shifty if I'm looking at my screen, even though that's where you live right now. But I'm trying to look up at my camera.
That's okay. If you see me going like this, it's because I have progressive lenses, and it's always like, do I want to just kind of stare at the screen like it's blurry, or do I want to be able to see clearly? So
I like that.
We're good.
It's almost a disapproving look. Really? We are not amused. Yeah, you just need to say that. You're good.
Well, welcome back to the show. How have you been?
Doing really well. Did we talk around the time of the first issue of Evie and the Helsings?
Yes. I don't know. Again, the whole pandemic. That 2 or 3 years is kind of a blur, and
yeah, it's the blip. In MCU ease, or it's the gas leak season if you want to compare it to Community. But yeah, it was so weird. But yeah, since the last time we talked, we've done 2 more issues of Evie and the Helsings, and I'm continuing to plug away on other books, and I've got Undead or Alive happening right now on Kickstarter. So I'm making comics, and then I don't know if I had my day job last time we talked, but I'm teaching full-time at Illinois State, teaching comics and sequential art, character design, illustration, digital illustration, and stuff like that. So I'm a happy boy, is what it comes down to. I get to make comics, and then I get to talk about comics and nerdy art to impressionable young minds. So it's a good gig.
Well, before we get into Undead or Alive, I know we've talked about this before, but kind of tell maybe somebody who hasn't seen an interview before. I mean, what's your history with comics as a reader and as a creator?
As a reader, I have read comics for the majority of my life. I think I was 5 when I got my first comic, which was Marvel Comics, Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos, I think number 102. The Howlers went undercover to stop the Germans who had counterfeit counterfeit plates, and it's the weirdest issue to have started on because the Howlers were not in army suits, but when I was a kid in the early 70s, there were tons of World War II movies, and I got it because it was Sergeant Fury. I got it because it was army stuff. But yeah, that book was just fantastic. I think it was Mike Friedrich writing it and Dick Ayers drawing it, and I loved that. And it's funny, myself and my other neighborhood pals would read war comics, we'd read westerns. We didn't read superheroes; they were for babies. And I think in my head that perception had happened because my older brother had a Superboy puzzle, and that puzzle had been around my whole life. Therefore, if I had access to it when before the mature age of 5, then that must mean it's for little kids. And I was certainly I was a sophisticated 5-year-old, obviously, but yeah, like all that changed. Like I said, we consumed comics just constantly, but a friend picked up an issue of Thor when I was 9. It was 1974, and he was big into mythology, and I read that Thor and I realized this is not kid stuff. This is sophisticated enough for my mature 9-year-old palate. And please interpret all the dripping sarcasm I have about my young, pretentious self. But yeah, I dove into the Marvel Universe whole hog at that time. Steve Englehart was writing the Avengers, and Sal Buscema was drawing it. And my first Marvel comic was Avengers 129, which was the beginning of the whole Kang story. And I was hooked, and I went back to the grocery store that had that, and they had Giant Size Avengers #2, which was written by Englehart and drawn by Dave Cockrum. And it continued that same storyline. And yeah, it was never the same after that. So that, I read comics through junior high. I set them aside a little bit at the beginning of high school. I was playing in bands, and I thought I was too cool, because I was busy, playing guitar and bass. But about junior year, I rediscovered comics, and I've been locked in ever since. So just decades of it. So that's as a fan.
Mm-hmm. How about as a creator? When did you take that love that you kind of fostered, through those years and say, I want to do this?
Well, that was a two-parter. In 1989, I started working in tabletop role-playing games. One of the people that worked at the comic shop where I worked was Tim Bradstreet. And Tim introduced me to the people at Game Designers Workshop, GDW. They were in the town that the comic shop I worked at was in. And they were looking for a graphic designer. And, they did like a war series called Twilight 2000. They did a science fiction series called Traveler, a steampunk series called Space 1889. And yeah, Tim introduced me, and I got a job there. And I worked in role-playing games for probably 9 or 10 years, always thinking I wanted to make the jump to comics the way that Tim did, the way that Tim Truman did before him. Bill Willingham of Fables started as an illustrator for TSR before he jumped over to Kamiko with Elementals. And I kept thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to make that jump. But I also kept thinking I wasn't good enough yet. And then after 10 years of waiting around to be good enough, I realized I'm never going to be good enough. I should just make the jump. So I started schlepping my portfolio in 1999. Didn't get, I kept getting all kinds of responses from people. You're this close. You're 80% of the way there. Just lots of stuff like that, but nothing that was really concrete. So I decided, instead of doing samples and, making a follow-up call, hi, we met at Wizard World Chicago. I'm the guy that had the Starman samples. No, not those Starman samples. I had the ones that had Solomon Grundy. No, not those. Because there were so many people doing samples, it was hard to distinguish yourself. So I decided my samples would be my dream project to create our own book. And that I would also pitch it. And that was a book called Athena Voltaire, which was an pulp adventure. And I ended up not finding publishing for it, but was contacted by a guy named Chris Mills, who was working with another guy named Joey Manley. Joey had a website of webcomics called Modern Tales. And the Modern Tales family was expanding, and they started a company called Adventure Strips. And Chris asked me to do Athena on there. So, yeah, from there, Athena was online. We got an Eisner Award nomination. That was really cool. So after getting an Eisner Award nomination for, digital comic, I did the smart thing and I abandoned webcomics entirely to seek validation in the direct market. And I'm just not. I stove like half a dozen times apparently, but yeah, we landed at a company called Speakeasy that went out of business about 2 months after we landed there, and then the kind folks at Ape Entertainment picked us up, and we were at Ape until they kind of, stopped publishing. I was lucky enough to land Athena at Dark Horse, but our imprint went away when Michael Hudson, the guy that was in charge of our imprint, suddenly developed cancer and passed. And then we landed at Action Lab, which is where the book is currently at.
Which is a whole other story.
That's the long and short of it. Yeah. So right now, I'm currently part of a class action lawsuit against Action Lab for breach of contract. I think there's like 40 creators or 40 creative teams. So we just wind its way through the courts.
Yeah, we just talked to Jeremy Whitley the other night, and I had a nice conversation with our friend Sean Pryor the other day, and have an interview coming out with him too. So, so
yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but hopefully it will be resolved sooner rather than later.
Well, I don't want to get into the details of that, but I know that I think the two of us were both kind of in the time when that whole company was kind of forming around the community that we are a part of, and it kind of took a left turn. So, but again, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about your book.
Okay. So, what do you want to know?
So, what is the current book is Undead or Alive, and is currently funding on Kickstarter, and you have about 22 or so days to go. Tell us about the book.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, the high concept is just, it's monster hunters. It's a love letter to all the cool monster books that I, had discovered in my youth. Specifically for this first arc, Swamp Monsters. The story takes place in Gerber's Crossing, Louisiana. So that's
Steve Gerber.
Yeah, lots of comic greats. Steve Gerber right there, and it follows the disappearance of a UK author that had moved to the US who wrote comics and books named Arael Moon, and yeah, his name is an anagram for Alan Moore. But yeah, it's not just Moore and Gerber. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of metafiction in it that kind of looks at the way that we respond to the fiction that we read and the realities that it makes. And I tried to do it more in a playful way rather than from a writing point of view, more in a playful way than being pretentious with it. But I wanted to nod and acknowledge, all these creators who had done this work that I really loved. But a high concept is only, as far as you can take it. And the book is drawn by my longtime collaborator, Jason Millay, who colors Athena Voltaire. He colors
Mhm.
Evie and the Helsings. He colors Ghoul Scouts. Um, I think we're pretty much joined at the hip creatively at this point. But he drew the first chapter, didn't have time to draw the rest. So chapters 2 and 3 are drawn by Patrick McAvoy, who just recently did a Gorgo a prequel graphic novel. So he's steeped in monsters. And then Jason,
I'm sorry, that's not the one that's currently funding on Zoop, is it?
yeah, that's
Oh,
Patrick.
hey.
Um, and then Jason did digital coloring, painting more likely on the whole book, and then I lettered it, and the whole package is edited by Chris Murrin, another CGS alum who, again, Chris is kind of stuck with me at this point. He's been editing all my work for over a decade now, and he's really patient with all my dumb questions. So it's a 112-page original graphic novel. So instead of, I really like serializing books on Kickstarter. I love playing around and doing a bunch of variant covers and all that stuff. But I also know, as a consumer, as a supporter, as a backer, as a reader, it adds up to back, 4 individual issues, at a Kickstarter price of 10 or $15 with shipping at $5 or $7. And it was just announced today, media mail prices are going to go up by 50 cents. I didn't want to, I would love to be able to sustain an original graphic novel model instead of serializing stuff. I've had Kickstarter friends tell me that I'll be leaving money on the table, and I'm okay with that if we can do beautiful books.
Mhm.
So, I know it's a little bit more of a buy-in for a $25 graphic novel instead of a $15 individual issue, which is kind of the price of a lot of Kickstarters for the basic cover, 20 for the variant. But instead of having to pay, you know, uh, around $88 for a mini series and a graphic novel on top of that, you're getting it all in one fell swoop. So I'm hoping that the audience responds to it, because I don't know how long we can sustain, multiple issue campaigns. I'd like to start doing this. Boy, I'm talking too much. I will shut up,
No,
and I'll
no,
try
no,
to answer more
that
succinctly.
no, that's fine. I know because I know that you had a previous campaign for Undead and Alive, which you know was not successful. I mean, I just
Yeah,
what kind of what are and you've I think you've kind of covered it, kind of what you're trying to do this time, as opposed to last time. Is there anything else that maybe I'm missing or something?
oh no, not at all. So we did a campaign for this. It was my second campaign after doing one for Athena Voltaire and the Volcano Goddess, and we were going to do it as an OGN, and the Kickstarter campaign was going to pay for Jason to finish the book. Um, and the campaign came up short, so it's just kind of sat. And Jason was going to finish the book, and we were going to kickstart it again, but he never had time. He's his day job is he does storyboards in Chicago, and he is the main film and TV storyboarder in Chicago. So he does all the Dick Wolf shows that film there, Chicago Fire and Chicago PD and all that. Plus, he did like the Candyman reboot that they did a few years back, and some other films there. So he just doesn't have time to do it, and we were able to get Patrick to do it. So the book is complete right now. So that's another big difference. We're not trying to fund the completion of the book; it's ready to go, and the instant we get the Kickstarter funds, it'll go away. I mean, it'll go to the printer. It'll leave my hands. That's what I mean when I say go. But it's been cool because having the time between when we did it originally, I've gotten a lot better at Kickstarter. I've gotten a lot better at fulfilling Kickstarters. Printing prices have come down. A lot of overseas printing is accessible to creators now in a way that it wasn't before. So all these things make it a lot easier to put the book together. And then just from a nuts and bolts version of the comic, one of the things we noticed when Jason and Patrick and I were talking about it was that it was really white. It was definitely a blind spot for Jason and I when we started this. It started as a backup in Hoax Hunters at Image
Mhm.
10 years ago, and we realized that our perceptions of the world around us and a lot of other things had changed, and we didn't need to keep the characters the way they were, and we added a lot more nuance and a lot more interesting textures to the characters. So
Mhm.
one of the characters is still a white guy, but we also changed one of the other characters. He's now a black man. He's a gay black man who's married, and
Mhm.
even though we don't see his home life, again, little things like that inform the stakes when you're putting a character into these situations, knowing that they have a spouse waiting for them at home. It's something that I hadn't done a lot of before from a storytelling point of view, but it increases the sense of peril over
Mhm.
characters' lives. So that was a really fun texture to add in there. And then the other character, who was Annie Snow, has been changed to Annie Ortiz. And again, in some ways, it doesn't affect the story being told, but in other ways, it does. It reflects a broader world, a more exciting world, a less tunnel vision world. But it also gives you some other thoughts on how the characters play out. And Annie's background, there are reveals in the story that I think inform the change of the ethnicity of the character as well. So a lot of this stuff plays out in how we can establish it across a bigger canvas going forward, and that's really exciting to me. I am not qualified to tell stories about uh, being black in America or being Hispanic in America. Um, I'm not qualified to tell stories about what it's like to be gay in America, but I would like to represent a broader variety of people within the context of what it's like to fight monsters in 21st century America. I can do that, and so by kind of embracing a bigger world and a bigger canvas, I think it makes the stories more interesting. And I'm not going to tread into territory where I would be encroaching on a story that someone who identifies. I'm stumbling over this, and I'm really sorry. I don't want to
No,
tell somebody else's story, is what I'm saying, but I want to represent a bigger world. And hopefully that doesn't sound as ham-fisted coming out of my mouth as it does in my head. But that was a big choice with the book, and I feel the book is better for it. Um,
mhm.
so I'm going to shut up before I dig a grave for myself.
No, that was fun. Do you, I mean, do you feel that with this campaign you're coming off, hopefully catching a little bit of backwind from the success that you've had with LV and the Helsings?
Um, I hope so. I hope some of the Evie audience follows us, but every campaign, every book is a totally different beast.
Mhm.
I was not expecting Evie to do as well as it did. It kind of blindsided both Don and me. Um, and the numbers so far for Undead or Alive kind of line up with what we did for The Catch. So
Mhm.
far, my two outliers in terms of running campaigns have been Athena Voltaire and The Terror on the Orient Express, and the Evie and the Helsings series with Don. So I'm not. There are people who can do a ton of Kickstarters, and every time they do it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger
Mhm.
and bigger. that's not me. I know that I'm not that guy, but I have a
Mhm.
pretty consistent audience that seems to show up for whatever I want to indulge myself in with a bunch of every one of these books is just me essentially hanging out creatively with a bunch of friends, and that's to me that's the best part of this. I get to work with Jason and Chris over and over, and then we get to have Don over for a play date, Don Cardenas on Evie and the Helsings, or Patrick for Undead or Alive, and it's really gratifying. So um, I hope we're building on what we've had, but regardless, it's just it's fun telling the kind of stories we want to tell with the people I like.
How do you feel that, from Athena Voltaire, I mean, that was the first, that was my first, when I first got to know you, getting the Athena Voltaire, volume in my Comic Geek Speak swag bag. um,
They
how
help
have
me out
you?
so much.
How do you feel that you've grown as a writer from that point to now? And what would you tell a younger Steve Bryant? What advice would you give him?
Well, the advice would be you will never feel ready. I never felt ready to write. I never felt ready to draw. And this is something that I tell my students now too is you're never going to actually feel ready. You're never actually going to feel like your work is quote unquote there. So just dive into it and know that you're going to get some bumps and some scrapes, but you're going to grow along the way. So that's what the advice would be. In terms of how it's different, I think I think I've gotten better with pacing and with
Mhm.
wrapping things up at the end. Um, like on Athena Voltaire, Volcano Goddess, the first book we did with Action Lab, and Ghoul Scouts, Night of the Unliving Undead, which was the first Action Lab Ghoul Scouts book, too. Um, again, coming from Ape Entertainment, where they had given me pretty much carte blanche to make the book the way I want to make it. Uh, I thought we would get to have longer last issues, and I was told that's not the case with Action Lab. So I had to trim the endings of those two books, and to this day they both feel a little bit truncated to me, like it's an abrupt finish. So that reading those books in print and going, oh, I wish I had the 3 pages I originally planned for this. Now I very consciously make sure that the finales on all these stories have the room to kind of breathe. And so I think as a writer, I'm better with that. I don't think I overwrite on internal monologues or dialogue as much as I used to. I think when you're getting used to writing, for me at least, well, and this is a great thing about collaborating with Chris Murrin as an editor, is he is never afraid to tell me, you're already showing this in the art. You don't need to tell also. And so, yeah, it's really good about paring stuff down. So I think I'm getting a lot more conscious of that. And so I think I'm relying on Chris a little less, um, so that when I'm doing a pass on a script before I share it with him, it's WW CD. What would Chris do? Or what will Chris do when I send it to
Yeah.
him? So, yeah, I'm trying to be more aware. Um, so yeah, I think that's where the writing's improving.
Now, as a writer and artist, do you ever get the itch to kind of want to do something that's where you're doing both?
Yeah, yeah. Athena Voltaire started that way, and then I went back to grad school, and that was when I licensed it to Action Lab, and I would just write and do the covers. Um, but I am working on the next volume, and when the lawsuit's resolved, it'll be coming out. Athena Voltaire and the Devil's Sea is
Hmm.
the next one, and yeah, I'm writing and drawing it, and I love if I had my way, everything that I think of as a writer, I would be able to draw, but I just don't have the time. So
Yeah.
on Bright Side, I get to just be a writer and letterer and let my friends go nuts on these scripts. But yeah, I love writing and drawing, and it's taken me a long time to realize that I I'm too damn slow to draw everything that I want that I write. So understanding your limitations, that's another lesson that I've had to touch the hot stove like 5 times before I realized.
Well, who are your inspirations when it comes to your writing? And because I again, you definitely have you're touching on the different monsters, and with the Kickstarter. But who are your inspirations for writing, and when you have time to draw?
Um, in terms of writers, I the first one that always comes to mind is Archie Goodwin when he would collaborate with Al Williamson or Walt Simonson. He was always such a complete storyteller, and he would always work really well with the confines of whatever uh, format the works were coming out in. You know, when he was doing Marvel books in the 70s or DC books in the 70s with Manhunter or Luke Cage or whatever, he worked within the comics code. When he was writing the Star Wars daily strip with Al Williamson, he understood, 3 panels, here are your beats, get this in, for a daily strip. And then he was also for a while an editor at Warren, and also writing a bunch of those creepy and eerie stories. And again, that's a different gig. They're complete short stories, and they're not code books and
Mhm.
comics code. So each of these books or each of these formats, he always tailored his work to fit it, and that's been a big thing for me. I love everything Ed Brubaker writes, especially when Steve Epting's drawing it. But yeah, Brubaker's Velvet is a big one. Brubaker and Epting's Velvet. Everything that Brubaker does with Sean Phillips is just a joy to read. Um, so those are probably the two big ones for me. A third one, and I feel like nobody gives him enough credit as a writer, is Jack Kirby.
Mhm.
I desperately want, and again, this is the I don't have time to write and draw everything that I want to do, but this is on my bucket list. I desperately want to write um, a comic series that follows the 1970s Jack Kirby format, where the first page is a splash page. It opens up to a double page spread. And then the story progresses. You've got 3 to 4 chapters per issue, and it's a complete story told within 18 to 20 pages. I mean, just roll that over in your head. Like, I feel like that is a creative puzzle box of a challenge for anybody, because Kirby did that consistently throughout the 70s and into the 80s. And it's a wonderful format. It's so comics, it just screams comics. It works so well in that medium. And I feel like everybody sometimes loses track of what a great storyteller Jack was, not in terms of power or in terms of panel to panel continuity, but in terms of creating this complete chapter month in, month out. So
Mhm.
he'd be the other one on that list. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
No,
Okay.
that makes complete sense. Um, I know we're kind of short on time here,
Yeah.
so is there anything else you wanted to mention about the Kickstarter that's currently running? And are you? I know you've been to a couple of shows. You were just at what C2E2 just happened?
Yeah, I just did C2E2 and Heroes Con. And then
Okay.
the end of June, I'll be in Davenport, Iowa at Planet Funk Con. So that'll be fun. I've never done anything in the Quad Cities, is
Hmm.
Davenport, Rock Island, and I'm blanking on the other two. But yeah, I'm doing that this coming weekend, June 28th through 30th. And then I will be back at San Diego Comic-Con in July in small press at my booth L1. So
Okay.
yeah, but the Kickstarter is moving along. I'm excited. I can't wait to get it out. Don is working on the 4th issue of Evie and the Helsings as we speak, and I hope to fulfill the Evie #3 Kickstarter before I leave for San Diego. And then yeah, moving into the next year, I'll pester you for to talk about the next book that's coming.
Well, you're always welcome to pester me. And are you planning on coming to the C2 or the CGS reunion show, or kind of keeping
Possibly.
that on the possibly? Yeah.
Well, the down because the week that it's at, I have a friend that I've talked with about trying to get out to Planet Comic-Con in Kansas City, and then I want to do C2E2 again because I've done it every
Mhm.
year. And the week after C2E2 is the Windy City Pulp Show, which I did last year, and it was a lot of fun. The CGS anniversary is on the week in between Planet Comic-Con and C2E2. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that and essentially give myself 4 consecutive weeks with conventions. I don't know. My partner
I understand.
my partner may kill me. She's really supportive, but I think that may be, a
Trust
bridge
me, I
too
know. I know where you're coming with
far.
partners who might kill over plans that revolve around comics. But
Well,
so
maybe I can talk her into a picturesque weekend in Reading.
a trip to the Shady Maple.
There you go. That'll sell her. Have some scrap.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely be in touch when you're ready to talk about your next project. But as we, why don't you send us out with you know one last pitch for the Kickstarter and where people can find you.
Um, Excellent. So yeah, I love this book, and I love to make books that are very personal to me, and this speaks to my inner comic book nerd. And if you have a love of books like Hellboy or 70s and 80s Marvel and DC monster books, um, or TV shows like Supernatural or The X-Files or any of that, this is probably a book for you. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky as Steve Bryant Art. I'm still on Twitter at Steve Bryant Art and Instagram at Steve Bryant Art. And inexplicably, my website is stevebryantcomics.com. But yeah, come see me.
Well, I mean, it's great catching up to you, and I wish we had more time, but we'll definitely have to do this again. And yeah, good luck as you in the last 3 weeks of your campaign. And as always, we'll continue to follow it over on Comic Watch and help spread the word with and help you reach that goal you have.
Cool. Thank you so much. And we'll talk again soon.
All right. Well, thank you again, and always great catching up with you, and always great sharing comic geek speak memories, and
And
we'll
you as
definitely
well.
have we'll definitely have to hopefully one day we'll finally meet up in person again. So
I need to make a pilgrimage east. But yeah, take care. We'll see you later.
all right, thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.